Welcome to Rave Waves, a production of the Rave Reviews Book Club. Today, Rave Waves presents Raiders, Not Haters. I'm one of your co-hosts, Shirley Harris Slaughter from Oak Park, Michigan, along with my fellow co-host, Joy Nuoso Nabamijoko from Palmdale, California. Hello, Joy.
Hi, Shirley.
We're here today to share our honest opinions about a fellow RRBC member's book that we've all read. It's called Terrace Call, Tetrasphere, Book One. Yes, I know, it's a new concept, honesty in reviews. But we're committed to giving just that because, once again, we're raiders, not haters. Welcome once again to our new Zoom studio. We're excited that you all are here with us today. We'd love comments and questions from those of you who have joined us in the Zoom gallery today. Notice the chat button down below at the bottom of your screen. You can, all throughout the show, we invite you to use the chat feature to send your comments or questions. Throughout the show, we'll also be opening up the floor for comments and questions. Merely raise your hand and let us know if you'd like to be recognized.
This segment of Raiders, Not Haters, is being sponsored by Mennonite Daughter, the story of a plain girl. More to come about this book later in the show. If you'd like to know how you can get your own commercial on air during one of our shows, please visit the Rave Waves tab on RRBC site or by clicking the link to the right in your chat window, the link to the chat in your window.
Today, Joy and I will be discussing our reviews, or shall I say, our honest opinions of one title in this segment, Terrace Call by P.T.L. Perrin. Joy, how about we start with you? What do you think of Terrace Call?
Yes, this was a very good read. I enjoyed it. At first, I started reading without paying attention to who was speaking. And that is quite confusing. That was quite confusing. Then I realized I had to see the name at the top of every heading, chapter heading, to know whose voice was telling the story. Only then did I begin not only to follow the story, but to enjoy it. These four teenagers, largely homeschooled, at least Jewel, one of them was. They meet for the first time in a school. Faith brings all of them to the same Cherokee reservation and the same school. The same faith singles them all out and brought them together. Their names, Jewel, Storm, and the twins, Sky and Paxton. Their mothers were abducted when they were pregnant with these teenagers by the Alerans. I hope that's the way it's pronounced. Some kind of UFOs. The Alerans were considered allies of Terra, our planet Earth. And Terra is kept alive by what they called the artifacts. Remember, this is the myth of the Cherokee Indians, a very complicated myth. Some of these myths can be traced to what we know from the Bible. In fact, at one point, these teenagers prayed to the Christian God to help them in healing the artifact. And it would seem that the prayer was answered. They healed the dying artifact, and then catastrophe. The story is well written with expert story development. My only problem is that I love reading standalone stories that are in series. And this one was not a standalone story. Here is where I part ways with the author. After the many ups and downs in the story, with the Drakans as the antagonists in this story, and the Watchers or Sentinels, who were the protectors of Terra, the story stops to continue another time. I enjoyed this book thoroughly. And much as I would like to know what happened to these teenagers, how their search ended, again, that will be for another time. Shelley?
Okay, it's weird because I'm going to comment behind you, but at the same time, I got to come back and tell what I thought of the story.
Yeah.
But your thoughts are kind of a little bit towards mine, but what and I don't want to get into my story, but it looks like that's what I would have to do to correspond back to what you're saying, because I did have some of the same thoughts. I felt that there was a disconnect because she was doing each individual character, but she just didn't give us enough, in my opinion, of those characters. So I still couldn't truly relate to them like I wanted to. The first character that she brought in, I didn't know how she was writing at the time. I thought, okay, this is the main character. I get to know her. But then all of a sudden she was gone and we had to come in with these other characters. And it might be a good way to write, but I guess I'm just not used to someone writing that way,
Yeah, like I said, Shirley, I was confused too at the beginning because I didn't know she was just going from character to character. I didn't know who was telling the story. Until then, I paid attention to I think when I got to the third chapter, where actually she didn't write it in chapters. She wrote it in characters. When I came to the third section of this, I noticed there was a name on top of that section. So I went back to check whether there was a name on the ones I've read before. And I saw, yes, there were names on top of them showing who was telling the story at that point.
I had to keep going back too. I had to keep going back to the chapter to see where the hell I was at.
Yes, that's when I started understanding what she was doing. And then at that point, I relaxed and then started to enjoy the story.
Yeah. Has anyone else in the audience read this story? Let me give you the name again in case you didn't catch it. Tara's Call by PTL Perrin. Does anyone remember reading that story?
I haven't read the story, but Joy, I would like to know what your star rating was for this story.
I can't hear you, Nani.
What was your star rating? What rating did you give the book?
Oh, I gave it a 5.
You gave it a 5. Thank
you. Yes.
Well, okay. We'll get into what I thought of it now. I'll just go ahead and give my story. I said it's a great story as my headline, and then I left that like that and make you wonder, okay? It's about humans and half-humans interacting with aliens. There is abductions and various versions and angles to tell it. This author uses several characters. There is no one heroine, and each gets to tell their side of the story. I'm not sure that works for me as the reader. I'm unable to get to know the characters really well. Their names are Jewel, Storm, Sky, and Pax. I didn't get to know them in a personal way. Mm-hmm. Sky and Pax were twins, and then Jewel and Storm. Storm is a guy, and Jewel is, of course, the woman, is the girl, and they were all teenagers going to high school. Okay. Take style, for example, STYLE style. It is like feeling a person's personality and you either like them or you don't. Well, personality comes through in this writing, and I must say I have mixed feelings about PTL Perrin's writing style. It's like I'm disconnected from her characters, and so I felt disconnected from her. Tara's Call is a good story. The flow is good, and there's a lot of anticipation and build-up, but you get exhausted trying to get to a conclusion. Did they actually save the planet, or didn't they? That could make for an interesting plot leading into the next book, because it sure wasn't answered in this one. It does make the case for a second book, and she did give us a taste of it with an introductory chapter. I suppose I like that. So I gave the author 3 stars just because I could take it or leave it when it comes to another sci-fi story. And that was my angle to it. I just, I didn't like going back to the chapters and to figure out where I was at. I said, oh, Jewel is there. But the good thing was she had Jewel in the first 3 chapters. Each chapter was her name only. And I said, this is different.
Yeah.
And so I went back, since I knew I got to know her a little bit better, then all of a sudden it switched to another character that you had to spend time getting to know. And that would have been a good thing, but I just don't feel like I really got to know him. I don't know why, but I just didn't connect.
Yeah, I've read another book that went from character to character like that before. And the first time I came across that kind of writing, I was just, I was off. I couldn't, get it all together. But this time I was able to follow it because it's a style that somebody may choose to write by, and it works well for them. And in this book, I think as soon as I understood what she was doing, going from one character, because she was making clear that she showed who was telling the story at each point. As soon as I understood that, and I thought it was okay, I started to understand the story, follow the story, and I really enjoyed that story. It was very well written. The characters were very well developed too, as far as I was concerned.
Well, I'm looking at the chat room. Let's see. It says from Bette Stevens, with a 5-star from Joy, I will download Patty's book. It sounds fascinating. And then Jan says, I agree, Betty. Joy's recommendations will make me move it up to my big TBR list. Pat Garcia, no, I can't hear anything. Pat, can you hear now, Pat? She doesn't, I don't even know if her mic's, if she has a mic, because nothing's showing up there. Okay. I'm going down the chat room again.
Shirley, in case I missed it, what was your star rating again?
I gave her a 3-star because of the disconnect I was having with the story. Not so much her writing, but just how it didn't come through to me the way I normally like to get a story.
Thank you.
Nothing against her writing. There was a good story plot, but you have to consider a whole bunch of stuff to aid towards you really understanding a book and really enjoying it. And so we need to start being really fair, when we do our ratings, and not just give everybody 4 and 5 stars.
Yes, that's true.
I just want to be honest. And 3 stars is not bad. I heard Bette say that. That's a good score. Okay. I'm still looking in the chat room. Is anybody in
Does anybody have any question? Just raise your hand. Yeah, Linnea.
Yeah, so I know that sometimes it's when you use point of view that sometimes you need someone else's point of view to advance the plot or the story. Was that the case in this book? That you did need to see everybody's point of view to understand the overall plot or story?
Yes.
Yes,
I think that's what she was doing, because that's why she gave us the name of who was telling this story at each point.
Yes, she would have Pax would be in there. Pax,
yes.
Chapter 11, Pax chapter 12, Pax chapter 13. Yes. And then you lose yourself in Pax. You get back in there, and then all of a sudden here comes someone else. So it was just like, it was a kind of a disconnect with telling the story from all of those perspectives. I can't put my finger on it, really.
Hi, Shirley.
Yeah.
This is Betty. I just wanted to say that I do an awful lot of reading because I belong to local reading groups as well. And this is a very popular technique, I find. And at first I found it very distressing not to be really introduced individually to characters. And I kind of call it myself plot-driven books rather than character-driven books. And it sounds to me like this is what it is. And I think that, for some people, they probably can't get used to it. I've read some books that are absolutely wonderful written that way. And so I think it's really, a lot of it has to do with your personal reading and writing and reading styles. So I just
Yes, that's why I brought up the style,
yeah,
because of that's very, very good what you just said. That it's an interesting book to discuss, because we're getting something different in a
right.
book this time. So in that regard, she did well. It's something to talk about, because it's probably a style we'll have to get used to if people start writing that way.
Yeah. Any more questions? Any more comments? Okay. Well, we've gone to the.
It looks like we're going to
We'll
go.
take a break now to pay some bills and highlight another book from our RRBC catalog. The sponsor for today's program is Mennonite Daughter, the story of a plain girl by Marian Beeman.
Well, there's a new title for us to sink our teeth into. To the audience, have any of you read the sponsor's book?
I have.
Oh,
I just went off to look for it. I've got it here somewhere. I was going to show you the cover. The commercial was fantastic. I was really interested in reading this book because my mother and sister lived in Pennsylvania in the Amish country for decades, and we'd go see them and go to all the farmers markets and all of that. And I'm also very interested in these little mini cultures throughout our country, just like I was so interested in Shirley's book, the Victory,
Our Lady of Victory.
Our Lady of Victory, because it brought me into a whole new culture and really opens your eyes. And with the Mennonite Daughter, Marian does a great job of leading us right from her childhood through her adulthood and the changes in her life. But I made so many connections. I didn't grow up as a Mennonite or in a special, religious culture sort of family, but there were so many things that are universal, that bring us all together. And I think it really does us great good to seek out these stories that the people in our country, in our families, in our communities, whether it's online or locally, have to tell. So I would highly recommend it. It was very well written, and I found it fascinating. And I did give it a 5-star rating.
Oh, that's good.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because I didn't know what Mennonite even meant. I didn't connect, had never heard that term before.
Right, and I'm sure that many people haven't. As I say, I did, just because of my connection with my mother and sister in Pennsylvania, so I was aware of that. But again, I just find, I think it really just opens up our whole scope of thinking and our appreciation for one another as a community, as neighbors, as national neighbors, because our country we are many,
Culture.
each pluribus unit, many are one. And it really, whether it's the national society or global society, it's so great to really get to know one another. So I hope that if you're interested in memoirs, and that this is definitely a memoir, and kind of getting a peek into another piece of the puzzle of America, this is a great way to do it.
Thank you for that. Go ahead, Jan.
Yeah.
Something Bet just said that really resonated with me, and this is why we love the Rave Reviews Book Club, because is that we have the opportunity to learn so much, like for instance Joy's books about a culture that we know nothing about, and I just finished reading Robert Fear's memoir, and I learned about a whole other place that I knew nothing about. So that is the beauty of reading to me, is that we can travel without ever leaving our homes.
You know, there was a time when Black writers were barely seen. The books that they did have were trivialized, and just me trying to just learn about me. I was reading some of these books like Gaines. His name is Donald Goines. I don't know if anyone has heard of him. He would write books that from the perspective of being in slavery or being racism and stuff, and he would tell these raw stories. And I was a little girl, so I didn't know anything about any of that because I was sheltered from it growing up north. Even though up north we had segregated housing, we had all of that, but we were so used to having that and having our own little Black communities that I wasn't touched about it until I got out in the real world. And so when you read my book, Our Lady of Victory, you saw where it was like I was writing that it was like a culture shock, just learning about white Catholics, because I grew up in a Black Catholic environment and had never seen a bunch of whites together. So that was like shocking to me at 9 years old to see that. And I realized that I was just a little peon in this huge world made up of all these white people. So that was a shock really shocking to me. So I wanted the reader to understand that from my perspective, because no one ever heard from our perspective before. We had newspapers in our community that was dedicated only to the white race, and the Blacks had to get their own newspapers and their own socialite society to praise what we did, because they ignored us. And the only time they put anything out there was when somebody did something terrible or robbed a bank, or, they created the narrative for us. So coming into Rave Reviews Book Club, I said to myself, well, if I can ever master this writing, I'll tell my story. Our Lady of Victory got me in with no writing skills whatsoever. So God helped me write that book. So I'm still learning how to write, because I'm writing from a limited perspective because I didn't have classes to learn how to write. So going to the university, I was telling Nani, that helped me to understand the other perspective of writing, where you create stories and create the characters. So it's an awful lot.
Shirley, you have to stop beating yourself up.
No, I'm not beating myself up. I'm just saying.
No, you have to stop it, because I really enjoyed your last book. What's the name of the Chronicles? It was very well written, but I
wrote that from a limited perspective, of a limited standpoint as well. Because
can you imagine what you can do when you begin accepting that you can write? So just stop it, because the more you write, the better you get.
Well, the more you learn
read
too, you better, because that university helped me to understand. I didn't know anything about developing characters. You learn that when you go to a writing school.
It was great, and I enjoyed it.
Okay.
Even
I have a natural writing ability, but I do need.
Then just write and let the editors do their work. You write and let the editors do their work, because we have professionals who can get your writing together and make it, clean it up for you.
Well, the newspaper Chronicles was written as a fiction. I was trying to delve into fiction on a true story, because I didn't want to tell this true story. That's with Crazy Hot. I told the true story because I didn't know how to write in fiction, where I could have just put everything out there. And I also had amnesia on a lot of stuff that I went through that came out after the book was published. Looked like I had flashbacks back to that, because I think I had PTSD and everything else when I was in that situation, you
Mhm.
know. And Nani was the one that would encourage me to write it, and I didn't want to. I was just, I didn't feel I had no manuscript. So I started writing everything from memory, and the thoughts were scattered everywhere. And when she got it, she was about to have a heart attack when she saw that manuscript.
Well,
So we worked through it. I found someone to help me develop the story, get the thoughts all together.
yeah,
And
we have people who do that too. We have
yes,
people who do
you
that
pay
too.
people to do that, and I did,
Yes.
because my first book I wrote it from, I just sat there and wrote it. My second one, I had to get a manuscript developed for it. So that's
Yeah.
what happened with me.
Well, I want to thank my co-host Shirley for joining me today and for being one half of the Raters, Not Haters team. Shirley, any final words or thoughts?
I think I said everything. I think I hogged the whole conversation.
Okay.
I hope everybody forgives me for running off like that, but I just enjoy this particular segment because of the thoughts that we were able to talk about, you know, especially what Bet was saying. Okay, thank you, studio audience, for joining us today and for this episode of Raiders Not Haters. We look forward to you joining us for our next show in October. Again, we're your co-hosts, Shirley Harris Slaughter.
I'm Joy Joko, wishing you all a wonderful weekend. And remember, when you are in the business of reviewing books, be a rater,
not a hater. Signing off from our Zoom studio, join us next time on Rave Waves, where all things literary are our passion. Please stay safe, try and stay well, and unless it's absolutely necessary, stay home. You can socialize later when we're on the other side of this pandemic. Bye for now.